The Texas Rangers just won their first World Series in franchise history after 6 straight losing seasons and 94 losses last year. The Rangers went through a rapid rebuild, spending over $800 million in just the last 2 off seasons, which has led a lot of people to the assumption that the Rangers simply just bought themselves a World Series. 2016 was the last time the Rangers made the playoffs, getting swept in the ALDS by the Toronto Blue Jays, and then they'd go through 4 straight losing seasons from 2017 to 2020. And this is where our story begins, because after the 2020 season, the Rangers finally acknowledged that what they'd been doing wasn't working. They needed to make a change, and that change was Chris Young. Young made his debut with Texas and pitched 13 seasons in the majors from 2004 to 2017. And on December 4th, 2020, he took over the GM duties from President of Baseball Operations Jon Daniels, who had actually traded Young from the Rangers to the Padres in 2005, and I'm sure he's moved past that. Texas had 2 major problems going into the 2021 offseason: a lack of talent at the major league level, and a pretty weak farm system. Their top 3 players by BWAR in 2020 were a 33-year-old Lance Lynn, career utility man Isiah Kiner-Falefa, and 3 true outcome master Joey Gallo. There just wasn't a core group of players here that you could move forward with. There wasn't much on the major league roster, and there wasn't much in their 21st ranked farm system. But even though he struggled, one bright spot in 2020 was the debut of their number 4 prospect, center fielder Leody Taveras, who Texas had signed as an amateur free agent back in 2015. The Rangers were starting in a tough spot, so the 2021 offseason would be the calm before the storm. In December, they traded Lynn to the White Sox for top 100 prospect, starting pitcher Dane Dunning, and made a trade with the Tampa Bay Rays.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
For first baseman Nathaniel Lowe, Tampa's number 8 prospect when he debuted with them back in 2019. Then in February, they traded franchise icon Elvis Andrus to Oakland, acquiring their number 11 prospect, catcher Jonah Heim. During the 2021 season, Lowe would take over as the first baseman and was a solid bat in the middle of the order, and Dunning would put together a respectable first full season, but it was a 28-year-old outfielder that the Rangers had purchased from St. Louis in December of 2019 named Adolis Garcia. You might have heard of him by now. That would make his first All-Star team and turned a lot of heads in his first full season. The Rangers would limp into the trade deadline this year, sitting at 36-66 on July 29th, so they traded Gallo to the Yankees, which brought them New York's number 14 and 15 prospects, shortstop Josh Smith, and second baseman Ezekiel Duran. Between making some savvy trades and their focus on player development, the Rangers had turned around one of their major problems, with their farm system jumping up to the 11th best in baseball at the midway point in 2021. While the prospects in the farm system were still developing, Taveras got another chance in the majors and still couldn't take advantage, and Heim really struggled as the backup catcher this year. Texas finished 2021 with a 60-102 record, last place in the AL West, and now their 5th straight losing season. And the front office had had enough. They felt like they had a couple pieces in place at the major league level, and they had a wave of young talent at the upper levels of the minors. So ownership gave them the green light, and boy, did they go all in. On November 28th, the Rangers signed second baseman Marcus Semien to a 7-year, $175 million deal coming off of a 45-homer season and his first All-Star team, as well as signing starting pitcher Jon Gray to a 4-year, $56 million deal after 7 years in the pitching hell that is Coors Field. Now that would already be a pretty big offseason for a lot of teams, right? But the Rangers had used cutting-edge analytics to figure out a revolutionary way to make their team significantly better in a very short amount of time.
Money!
The very next day, it was announced that the 2016 Rookie of the Year, a 2-time All-Star and Silver Slugger, and the 2020 World Series MVP and champion with the Dodgers, shortstop Corey Seager, agreed to a 10-year, $325 million deal with Texas. The Rangers had now revamped their middle infield and entire lineup with 2 All-Star level players in one offseason. They also signed starting pitcher Martin Perez to a 1-year deal, who had started his career with Texas but spent the last 3 years with Minnesota and Boston, and in March they traded IKF to the Twins in exchange for catcher Mitch Garver. All in all, the Rangers spent just over $580 million on free agents this offseason, the most of any team in MLB, more than double the second place Dodgers. And this is where the narrative of them buying their championship starts, but let's keep going and we'll talk more about this later. Texas started 2022 with their shiny new toys and now the 9th best farm system in MLB, with the hopes that this young talent would be able to fill in around their new superstars. But Semien and Seager both struggled a bit in their first seasons in Texas, with Semien getting off to a rough start through May and then picking back up, and Seager just being an absolute victim of the shift. Rounding out the lineup, Garcia took a step forward here in his second season, and Lowe broke out as the Rangers' best hitter this year, but Heim took over as the starting catcher and just couldn't manage much offensively, and Garver really struggled with injuries and was done for the year on July 11th. Despite its struggles, the Rangers' offense took a step forward in 2022, but the pitching was still just as bad. Dunning still struggled to really establish himself in the rotation, and his season ended in September due to hip surgery. John Gray was about average and missed some time with a knee and oblique injury, but Martin Perez was the ace of the rotation, making his first All-Star team. Despite their new superstars and some players taking steps forward, the Rangers still weren't a complete team, finishing with the 68-94 record, and ownership decided it was time for another change, firing John Daniels and putting GM Chris Young in charge of baseball operations. Now, even though they'd managed to turn around their farm system, a big problem for the Rangers was that they still hadn't really gotten much out of it yet. Leody Taveras took a step forward at the plate, but was still below average. Ezekiel Duran wasn't able to do much off of the bench after making his debut, and the Rangers' top prospect, the number 29 prospect of 2022, third baseman Josh Young, struggled in his first taste of the majors as a September call-up. Now, Texas went into the 2023 offseason with one thing on their mind: pitching. The offense had improved in 2022, and that was even with both of their new superstars struggling at the plate, so they felt pretty fine about the lineup. But their pitching was still a big problem, especially the starting rotation that ranked 25th in ERA, 24th in FIP, and 26th in WHIP, allowing way too many of these base runners a free pass with a 29th ranked walk percentage. Texas addressed the offense last offseason. Now it was time to fix the pitching, and yeah, there might not be a better way to make your rotation better than adding Jacob deGrom to the top of it. You know, when he's actually on the field, but we'll get to that. They signed the 2014 Rookie of the Year, 4-time All-Star, and 2-time Cy Young winner to a 5-year, $185 million deal to be their new ace. But they knew that just having an ace doesn't make a rotation good. They needed to add more still. So along with deGrom, they signed Andrew Heaney to a 2-year, $25 million deal coming off of a breakout half season with the Dodgers, and Nathan Eovaldi, a 2021 All-Star, to a 2-year, $34 million deal, along with Martin Perez accepting the qualifying offer and coming back, and making a trade with the Braves for Jake Odorizzi. But the biggest addition this offseason might not have even been a player. GM Chris Young was able to talk Bruce Bochy out of retirement, who managed the Giants to their World Series wins in 2010, 2012, and 2014, and get him in the dugout to now lead this team. So now with deGrom, Eovaldi, Heaney, Perez, Gray, Dunning, and Odorizzi, the Rangers had the makings of a pretty good rotation to pair with their lineup. But all this new depth was going to be tested early on in 2023. On April 5th, Jake Odorizzi would need arthroscopic shoulder surgery and was done for the year. The Rangers' rotation was already taking its first hit, and the injuries would hit Texas early on this year, with Mitch Garver also going down in April for almost 2 months with a sprained knee, and Corey Seager missing over a month with a strained hamstring. Now, these injuries could have been a huge blow for this team, but Texas was finally bearing the fruits of their farm system. Ezekiel Duran filled in with Seager out and worked himself in as a top role player this year. Leody Taveras took another step forward offensively and played solid defense as the starting center fielder, and Josh Young took over as the starting third baseman and made the All-Star team in his first full year. But the worst injury of April would happen on the 28th, when the Rangers' new ace would leave his second game in 3 starts with injury concern. But this time it was for good, with deGrom ending up having Tommy John surgery on June 12th. But despite these key injuries early on in the season, Texas would get off to a great start, sitting at 47-28 with a 6.5 game lead in the division on June 23rd. Texas came out of the gates hot, but they knew that they still had issues that they had to fix, and this started on June 30th by making a trade with the Royals for reliever Aroldis Chapman. So even though they made this trade to try to improve their bullpen, which was their big weakness all year, and Chapman would end up getting replaced by Jose Leclerc as the closer, the Rangers would hit a bit of a skid heading into the trade deadline, and the injuries were just piling up again. Nathan Eovaldi would miss over a month with a strained forearm on July 18th, Corey Seager would miss more time after spraining his thumb on the 21st, and Jonah Heim strained his wrist on the 26th. On July 29th, the Rangers only had a 1-game lead in the AL West. And if we know anything about this front office and ownership at this point, yeah, they were gonna go for it. With the injuries to their rotation, Texas needed starting pitching, so they made a trade with the Mets to bring in 8-time All-Star and 3-time Cy Young winner Max Scherzer, and they made another trade with the Cardinals to get Jordan Montgomery in. Any guesses who was better? With the rotation reloaded, the Rangers were ready for the second half, with their big bats ready to lead them to a playoff push. Through their injuries, Seager was still putting up MVP-type numbers, and Garver was an impact bat as the DH, and then Semien was bouncing back to his all-star level, and Garcia was breaking out to make his second all-star team too. But the Rangers would end up losing the division lead in late August, and now the fight was on. But the farm system would once again give them that final push that they needed. September 8th would be the debut for the Rangers' top prospect of 2023 and the number 8 overall prospect at the end of this year, outfielder Evan Carter. And does anybody else get the vibes from his name that he should be the lead singer of a 2000s boy band? Carter was absolutely electric at the plate, and he would be the final piece of the puzzle for that lineup. But it was the starting rotation that came through big for this team. With DeGrom going down early, Eovaldi stepped up and took over as the number 1 for the rotation. Dunning was solid starting the season out of the pen and then moved back into the rotation. Montgomery was phenomenal during the second half after coming to Texas, and Scherzer was able to turn his season around after his trade. The Rangers would end up clinching a playoff spot on the second to last day of the season and finish the season tied with the Astros at 90-72, with Houston holding the tiebreaker, making Texas a wildcard team. They would go on to sweep the Rays in the wildcard series, then the Orioles in the divisional round, setting up an AL West rivalry match with the Astros in the American League Championship Series. Texas would win the first 2 games in Houston and put themselves in the driver's seat, only to lose the next 3 games at home.
Oh no! We suck again!
So with all the momentum against them and faced with elimination, the Rangers would take hold of the series once again and win the last 2 games in Houston to earn their spot in the World Series. They would split the first 2 games in Texas, and then they decided they'd had enough of this shit.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
And they took the next 3 games in Arizona to secure the franchise's first World Series championship. And not even get to celebrate in the pool. What a bummer. The Rangers had one of the top offenses in baseball, an arguably top 10 rotation, and a bullpen that really struggled until it mattered most in the playoffs. But now that we've gone through how they even got here, it's time to answer the big question. Did they buy this World Series win? Texas was 4th in total payroll this year, and let's not pretend like spending money doesn't help a team be more competitive. If you're smart about it, because the 3 teams with bigger payrolls this year, the Mets, Yankees, and Padres, well, they all missed the playoffs, and the Angels, who were 8th, also missed the playoffs, but don't even get me started on those fuckers. So it's not just as simple as you spend money and then you win. If you're gonna spend big, then you have to make sure that you're getting your money's worth out of the guys that you are paying, because nothing kills a team like having a huge chunk of your payroll get wasted on a player that's not performing, and then you still have to fill in the gaps around those guys, or you're just gonna end up as the Angels and then no. I said we weren't gonna do this. Texas really only has 3 big contracts in DeGrom, Seager, and Semien, since the Mets are paying a good chunk of what Scherzer's owed. But obviously, they signed all 3 of these to big contracts as free agents. None of these guys were homegrown. So that's where I can see why people say that Texas bought their championship. But elite players, like those guys that you can build a championship roster around, they don't come along very often. So when you get your chance to get one or a couple on your team, no matter how you have to get it done, you damn well better do it. And then as far as the rest of the team, like, how did they really buy more than most other teams can and do? Eovaldi, Gray, and Heaney's deals aren't anything crazy. They developed Young, Tavares, Duran, and Carter, and then they made smart moves to go and get Garcia, Dunning, Heim, Lowe, Montgomery, and Garver. They paid the money to get their superstars now rather than wait to see if one or two of them develop from within. And like I said, I honestly can't blame them for that. And then they developed talent around them through their farm system and filled in the gaps where they needed to by making smart trades or free agent deals. They weren't just outbidding everybody. I can't say that the Rangers just straight up bought this championship. Did they spend money to make their team better? Absolutely. But they didn't go out and spend over $25 million each on half of their team. And they didn't even have one of the guys that they spent big money on for most of this year, which is terrifying to think about for next year. Texas was willing to spend so they could start winning now. Now that's gonna come with the trade-off that these big contracts never work over the last couple years. But they were able to build a competitor for right now by spending smart and not just relying on throwing money at the problem until they finally won. But maybe this is just me, so let me know what you think about this. The Texas Rangers managed to build a contending team in only a couple years and win their first World Series, but they had to beat another team that made a quick turnaround to win that championship. The Diamondbacks managed to pull off a quick rebuild of their own and turn into competitors here in 2023, led by their rookie sensation, Corbin Carroll. So make sure you check out the video that's on your screen next to find out about Carroll's meteoric rise to MLB superstar.